Okay, good morning, everybody. Come on in and have a seat. Our keynote's going to start. Welcome, everybody, to Cloud Expo. This is our 10th anniversary. If you were fortunate enough to be here a little earlier, you got to hear me talk about it a little bit. And now we're gonna dive down into the real stuff. So get everyone to come on in, have a seat, make yourself comfortable. No, not yet. Hang on a second. We want to set this for when he starts. Yeah, okay. I was eating into the keynoter's time there. We don't want to do that. So I'll stop doing it. Jonathan Hoppe from Total Uptime is going to join us. And during my earlier remarks, I briefly mentioned this idea of a transition from cloud computing to digital transformation, and Jonathan's going to talk about that journey and maybe rewards and whatever he's got to talk about. Jonathan Hoppe.
Thank you, Roger. All right, good morning. I actually didn't expect to see anybody out here at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, so that's pretty good. Is anybody in IT or DevOps? Typical. I mean, that's actually quite unexpected. I've actually had a lot of people work for me over the years in IT and DevOps, and they were never there on a Monday morning. Go figure. Well, actually, 2 of them were, but they weren't sober, so they don't really count. But anyway, I'm impressed that you're here, and you know, this is going to be awesome. I think we're going to get along pretty well. First off, I want to be very candid. I'm not a salesperson. In fact, our entire company doesn't have any salespeople in it. So no sales pitch. You can let your guard down. You don't have to worry about that. And in fact, to show you how unsalesmanlike I am, I'm changing the title of my talk this morning from 4 Essentials to Achieve DX Hero Status Now to 3 Essentials to Achieve IoT Data Mining Blockchain using a hyperconverged machine learning infrastructure with artificial intelligence for big data real-time analytics deployed on quantum computing delivered service-oriented architecture. I couldn't even say it. I do have an acronym at the bottom there for any people who are in government. I did my very best. It's actually a pretty big failure. I also promised no hype coming your way today. I actually really despise hype. And in fact, I brought along a prop today, this button that says hype on it. It's here to actually protect you in case I say something that may be full of hype. I do need a volunteer. And you said you're an IT, sir. This is easy to operate. You just have to press the button. So if you can do that for me, that would be great. It'll be obvious when you need to use that, so I'll leave it at that. So a little background on myself. I'll put my picture up, which is unnecessary because I'm right here. I started off my career in graphic design, creating things for print, primarily. That evolved over the years to really becoming a web developer. That migrated to starting my own hosting company, which then progressed to developing and designing networks and building data centers. To really where I am today, our company has a cloud platform that helps our customers deliver their applications online with high availability, security, and performance. So I'll leave it at that because any more information about me is irrelevant and personally rather embarrassing. So on that note, you may never have said anything embarrassing in your life. I did actually 10 minutes ago, but it happens all the time. But it reminds me of when I was growing up in Canada, and that's actually where I learned to talk like this. And actually, I don't do that anymore, but the point was, it was 1998, and I was delivering a print job to an oil and gas customer of mine. And he said, Jonathan, you're a great graphic designer. You need to get out of that and do the next big thing. And here I thought, okay, multi-level marketing pitch coming. Amway was big at the time, so that's what I feared the most. But he brought me over to his computer and he showed me something that looked like this. Now, it wasn't this particular website, but it was something from the very same time period, and it had the same epic design. And I can't remember exactly, what happened at that point, but I know I looked at him and I looked at what he was showing me, and I'm like, dude, that is so butt ugly. It's totally lame. I actually didn't talk like that back then. But because what I said to him was so stupid, that's how I kind of replayed in my mind. So, but I really did leave his office thinking he was off his rocker. And clearly the internet and the web has become everything he said it would be. So I'll leave that point alone, and I'll ask you a question to get your thinking cap on. And the question is, let's maybe assume you're at a swanky social event, and somebody said, actually that's a dumb example because I don't go to swanky social events. In IT, you don't even get invited to those things. I might get bounced from them. But anyway, the question really is, what is the digital transformation? You know, it sounds like a simple question, really. But does it have a simple answer? So, digital transformation really has been a term since about 2011, but it's been hype for the last couple of years. Why is that? Why all of a sudden? And let me be honest with you, I'm not a fan of hype at all. So that's why this is going to be a different keynote. See, digital transformation reminds me when the cloud became all the rage, especially cloud computing at that time. And I was in the data center business. We had customers who started doing virtualization, and they renamed their virtualization to cloud computing. And one of the customers told me that. I'm like, man, that doesn't make any sense. If I go into the data center there and down to aisle 4 and rack 14 and I power down your rack, your cloud is down. Shouldn't cloud be better than that? But you know, the reality is people really didn't care. And today it's really still the same way. I lost a cloud server at Rackspace in Hong Kong a couple weeks ago because the underlying host failed. Why is that? Why didn't it just boot up on another host? I mean, that's how we've configured our own lab environment. It just seems basic common sense to me. But that's not the way it is. Here's a quote from Larry Ellison from 2008. He says, the interesting thing about cloud computing is that we've redefined cloud computing to include everything that we already do. The computer industry is the only industry that is more fashion-driven than women's fashion. Maybe I'm an idiot, and we can talk about him afterwards about that. But I have no idea what anybody is talking about. What is it? It's complete gibberish. It's insane. When is this idiocy going to stop? Today, he probably wishes he could erase that off the internet, but he said it, and it is true. My point is, some things look really great on the surface, but when you dig deep into them, they aren't substantive. Because of that very cloud scenario I described to you with my customer who converted virtualization to cloud computing, today the term cloud is really just synonymous with commoditized. You know, the other interesting thing about when that term came out, cloud computing, there was another term just before that called utility computing. Why didn't that take off? I have a hunch on that it was just too honest. So anyway, back to digital transformation. What does it really mean? And is it different than a technological evolution? In Canada, when I was 12 years old, my dad had worked for various computer companies, Digital Equipment, IBM, Sperry Univac, and he mostly sold mainframes to big organizations that needed them. Well, he had transitioned at that point to selling personal computers to people, and he moved to a company called Wang. And one day, he brought home a Wang for me. I really like that thing, actually. Beautiful monochrome monitor on there. It was actually very funny to a 12-year-old boy, because like, hey, Mom, I'm going to go downstairs and play with my... But anyway, I learned how to program BASIC on it, and I actually wrote up homework on it once, which was stupid because we didn't have a printer. I still had to handwrite it all out and bring it to school. That's when I learned the word moron, because that's what the girls called me. But anyway, shortly thereafter, he brought a Wang enhancement home. And that consisted of a really nice acoustic coupler modem. It was pretty cool, right? You dial up the network you want to connect to, you grab the handset, and you stick it into the foam sockets, and the computer took off from there. The computer couldn't even dial up at that point, because our phone switch didn't have touch-tone service. So for me, my life suddenly transformed from having a dumb computer sitting on a desk to being connected to a very large network that I could all of a sudden surf bulletin boards, right? It was totally rad for like 5 minutes. Well, apparently what happened to me there is not a digital transformation. But you would have been hard-pressed to convince me at that time. So let's look at the definition of digital transformation and see where I went wrong. We'll start with digital. It says, pertaining to, noting, or making use of computers or computerized technologies, including the internet, and transformation, the act or process of transforming. So when my computer transformed to becoming connected to get connected to a much bigger network, no, that's not a digital transformation. Fair enough. I must have screwed up, so let's look at some other examples here to see if they qualify as digital transformation. How about this one? Yeah, you remember those? You need a pair of shoes, you go in there, you go to the shoes section, you call all the people that sell them in your area so you can go there and check the stuff out. And you have to use this device on the top of it that's tethered to your wall. Or this. You don't even have to go anywhere, but you could look everybody up. Or you could just order online and have it shipped to you. No, that's apparently not a digital transformation either. How about this one? Remember that Walkman? I loved cassette tapes. Remember making mixtapes? Right? And if you break it, you'd have to pull it out there and get Scotch tape and put it back together. And then use a number 2 pencil to get the tape all back in there. But now, that's not a digital transformation either, apparently. So, point number 1 of my talk this morning is be skeptical. I bet you didn't expect that from me, did you? Every other keynote I've heard for the last 2 years on digital transformation pitches it completely differently. And just like I was skeptical of my customer when he introduced the web to me, I think we should be skeptical of hype. Think about it for a moment. So let me modify my earlier question. Is digital transformation real or is it hype? So to answer that, let's look at a few predecessors with me, if you will. Yeah, e-commerce, it's the late 90s. Remember the mega failures of the dot-com boom? eToys.com, Dr. Coop. There was also Boo.com. I think Boo.com dropped $135 million of venture capital in the first 18 months. Oh, Webvan, do you remember Webvan? They were the first food delivery service to the door concept, but they completely underestimated the cost of actually driving to your door. Oh, Pizza Hut, 1994. They sold their first pizza online. A large pepperoni, mushroom, and extra cheese. Good choice. I would have gone for 3 meats, but that's just me. And the Los Angeles Times at that time said the idea was clever but only half-baked, and the geek chic way to nosh. But here's the interesting thing. Pizza ordering has really only taken off 20 years later. In 2014, Pizza Hut says that they sold 30% of all pizzas through digital channels. That includes website, apps. The other 70% is coming from walk-ins or telephone. I have a hunch there may be some fax orders in there too. Amazon, clearly the poster child of e-commerce, right? They went public in 1997, and they only sold books at the beginning, and they finally turned a profit 5 years later. They hung on, clearly, and started selling everything else, but their stock really only becomes interesting and starts shooting up in around 2010. The stats today for e-commerce are still in the hopeful category. The latest stats here from July of this year say that the U.S. e-commerce has jumped to 13% of all retail sales. Wow. And look, there's an asterisk down there for in-store retail sales. We're assuming that What's not 13% is all in store. Maybe there's some mail order in there. This was the kind of statement you would see back then. Online shopping could explode into a $5 billion sales channel in a few years. They really did hyphenate online, so I kept that authentic for you. And more recent one, by 2020, brick and mortar retail spaces will be little more than showrooms. We've all heard that. Interesting, because that's only 14 months away, 13 and a half-ish. So, especially given that 13% stat from July, is this really possible? Is this going to happen? People always say that Best Buy is the showroom for Amazon. And we also know that we also do a lot of research online, and if we want it right away, we go to a local store to get it. So how does that work? And if this quote is true, why are stores like Ulta Beauty, Dollar General, Aldi, Target, Walmart, and Costco still opening stores by the hundreds every year? On the flip side, however, stores like JCPenney, Macy's, Sears, and Kmart are closing by the hundreds. So maybe it's just a shift in consumer behavior, or is it a, I don't know, technological evolution? But I digress on e-commerce. I'll leave it alone. Today, it is clearly the standard in business. And you know what? It should be. But when that word arrived on the scene 20 years ago, are you ready for the button, sir? It was hype. We need a good, too bad it wasn't louder. Don't misunderstand me, though. I am not knocking e-commerce whatsoever. Only the buzzword that was associated with it over 20 years ago. All right, let's consider another word. This is a favorite. Big data, or data if you're Canadian. Hasn't data always been big, though? That's the thing. Ever since the beginning of the computer age, we've fretted over lack of storage. When I got my Wang, it had 20 megabytes of storage. I filled it up in a few months. A couple years ago, I bought a new machine with a terabyte SSD in it. I filled it up in a few months. Well, do we really need a hype word to tell us that we're generating more and more data all the time? So to make sure that I'm not misunderstanding this word big data, I found many definitions online. This sums them up very nicely. And it says big data is a term that describes the large volume of data, both structured and unstructured, that inundates a business on a day-to-day basis. So, okay, big data is clearly hype. Thank you, sir. You're good at that. All right, next one, hyperconvergence. Doesn't it just mean integrated? I mean, hasn't technology always been integrated? I went online to get some definitions, and this one comes up, and it says hyperconvergence is an IT framework that combines storage, computing, and networking into a single system, usually from one vendor, in an effort to reduce data center complexity and increase scalability. You know what that sounds like? My Wang. It had storage, it did computing, and with the enhancement, it connected to networks. Fair enough, let's continue with the definition. Hyperconverged platforms include a hypervisor for virtualized computing, software-defined storage, and virtualized networking, and they typically run on standard off-the-shelf servers. So there you go. If my Wang had supported VMware, or VMware had existed at the time, then it would have been hyperconverged. But what smells even more fishy here is that why aren't we calling this private cloud? So you know what I'm going to label hyperconverged? Hype. Perfect. Internet of Things. Okay, so now we're extending internet connectivity beyond standard devices to a range of traditionally dumb and non-internet connected everyday objects, like this toaster here. Now, I like this because I could cue up the words, "you're grounded," and then when my kids make toast in the morning, they would get the message and I don't actually have to talk to them. That's slick. How about this egg minder tray? It tells you when you run out of eggs. This is how I know I'm out of eggs. And you know what I have to say about all these things? In all seriousness, though, isn't this a natural technological evolution of things? You know, as we create new technologies, they're naturally more high-tech. They're naturally more integrated. They naturally maybe have network capabilities. And as we refine existing products, like a dishwasher or a washing machine, even cars, we start improving upon them and connecting them and making them smarter. Why do we suddenly need a buzzword like IoT to define what I believe is a natural technological evolution? So again, IoT. One more, a favorite today, AI. Really? My $300 smart thermostat doesn't quite understand to leave things alone. I work at home. I'm always home. Stop changing the temperature! It clearly lacks intelligence. How about spam? Aren't spam filters the original machine learners? I keep getting enlargement emails every week. Why is that? Because enlargement pills don't even work. It's time for these things to stop. Well, the bottom line, humans are very predictable. So, I do the same thing every day. Get up at the same time, go to work at the same time, come home at the same time, eat at the same time. Shouldn't this be a no-brainer for AI? The funny thing is when I talked to my mother about it, she was 77 at the time, and she said, AI actually has some merit, which didn't make any sense because my mother always thought that anything to do with computing was dumb. And I said, why do you say that, Mom? And she says, well, your intelligence has always been artificial, so this could be a boon for you. Bless her heart. I live now in the South, and she lived in the North, and she didn't know that that wasn't entirely a kind statement. You may have seen this one. So here's the bottom line. I hate hype. I think you've probably figured that out by now. But I also want you to know that I'm not mocking any of the technology that is behind the hype words that I've talked about. E-commerce, big data, hyperconvergence, IoT, AI, these are all real. The technologies behind them are impressive and transformational. There's no question about that. Just don't be lured by the hype. So why is IT full of hype? I think it's our industry specifically that wants to make it sound like we're so much further ahead. We're the leader in progression. IT people even use it in their vocabulary, even IT salespeople that call me all the time, and they're like using words like game changer, low-hanging fruit, let's circle back. These things drive me nuts. Those terms are really ripe for disruption. So I came up with something. Here's my idea. Let's iterate a paradigm shift of our core competency, data mine and monetize our pain points because it's right in our wheelhouse for us coding ninja to digital natives. If we take these actionable insights, achieve alignment, use all of our bandwidth, eat our own dog food, ramp up, engage Stratcom, and leverage our workflow to make it more customer-centric, we'll start growth hacking, we'll have more engagement, fewer silos, and I'll have buy-in so I won't have to take a next-gen deep dive anymore. So let's go back to digital transformation. I really wanted to get the official definition, which doesn't really exist. There's so many. But this one seems to be the most appropriate. Digital transformation is integration of digital technology in all areas of business, fundamentally changing how you operate and deliver value to customers. Hasn't business been doing this all along since the beginning of the computer age? Perhaps I should phrase that differently. Hasn't successful business been doing this all along from the beginning? I read an outstanding article in Harvard Business Review from March of this year entitled, Why So Many High-Profile Digital Transformations Fail. And the writers talk about several interesting stories that I'll quickly recap for you. In 2011, GE embarked on an ambitious attempt to digitally transform their product and service offerings, embedding sensors into many products, building a huge new IoT platform. But investors didn't acknowledge the transformation, the CEO was ousted, and they started cutting costs. Nike halved the size of its digital unit in 2014 by discontinuing its Nike Plus Fuel Band activity tracker and some other investments. Procter & Gamble wanted to become the most digital company on the planet, which is odd for a company that makes soap and toothpaste, but they ran into growth challenges. Burberry set out to become the world's best digital luxury brand, but performance suffered, and Ford invested heavily in digital initiatives to see its stock price lag. The reason these companies failed miserably is because, and I quote, while their companies had plenty of resources, the big digital bets did not pay off quickly enough or richly enough to counter the drain they represented on the rest of the business. Sounds like they may have bought into the hype and jumped in with both feet. Or maybe they needed to make big corrections. I suggest you read the article, actually. It's very interesting. So the allure of digital can become all-consuming. Executives end up paying too much attention to the new and not enough attention to the old. Sears, for example, invested a lot of money in analytics. That was not a bad decision, except that they needed to pay more attention to the old. See, I believe in IT, we sometimes lose our rational decision approaches. Decisions are inevitably influenced by hype from vendors. It can come from the media, consultants who are paid for their thought leadership, many high-tech experiments, a lot of case studies that really get everybody excited, and it keeps people wanting more. These aren't my words. These are the words of the writers of this article. And you know what? They are right on the money. So here's the takeaway from this. I mean, I've just beaten down the top 5 buzzwords of the last 20 years. I truly believe the takeaway is point number 2 in my talk, which is be strategic. When you hear all the keynotes and all the hype about digital transformation and businesses who fail to take the leap quickly enough or large enough, and they don't jump on the bandwagon for a buzzword, I think you need to be quite skeptical and careful. The big companies I just gave a moment ago as examples are, a perfect point. They move too fast, trying to rapidly incorporate all of these things into their business. Digital transformation success isn't about technology at all, actually. It's about an innovation strategy. Let me elaborate a little bit on that. The quickest way for a company to go out of business is to implement digital transformation frantically and reactively versus deliberately and strategically. It's important to embrace and implement digital transformation, but not because of the hype, but because it's essential to your business. It needs to transform to succeed. See, I believe the sharpest companies are always looking out to the horizon to make incremental changes continually versus big changes less frequently. Almost like an agile development life cycle, if you will. Netflix is a prime example of a company that saw change on the horizon and started to make change slowly. They didn't react and proceed. The moment they saw streaming, they didn't dump millions into it and go all out. No, they introduced it slowly. In fact, streaming was free for their customers who had DVD subscriptions at the beginning. Isn't that a great way to beta test an idea? Today, Netflix, no question, they're a powerhouse, but their demise was predicted in 2002. And you probably know that they approached Blockbuster to acquire them for a measly $50 million back then. But Blockbuster didn't see it. They weren't interested in buying Netflix. And why is that? Well, they thought what Netflix was doing was just a niche, or a niche if you're Canadian. Clearly, they were wrong. Look at where the two companies are today. So the sudden appearance of the word digital transformation is most definitely hype. But you know what? Perhaps the word is necessary to get companies thinking about their technological inactions. First, I hope it's painfully obvious that you should not jump in with both feet as a result of the hype. That's a surefire way to lose money and perhaps go out of business. One of the biggest misconceptions CIOs have is that all of their competitors are way further ahead of them. This is because there's much admiration and popular press around the fastest transformers, but little critique of how hard transformation is. Secondly, the notion that you either lead, follow, or get out of the way is just a scare tactic. There are truths to that, but don't let it scare you. All right, how's your company doing? MIT Sloan Management Review and Deloitte do an annual global survey of over 4,000 executives, managers, analysts from around the world. And they asked this question: imagine an ideal organization utilizing digital technologies and capabilities to improve process, engage talent across the organization, and drive new and value-generating business models. How close is your organization to the ideal on a 10-point scale? And this slide shows the answer to that question. About 70% are in the early or developing, and only 3%, way on the right, think they have it all figured out. So your company may not be behind. Your competitors may not be ahead of you. So what's stopping your organization from a digital transformation? The same study asked, what are your biggest challenges impacting your company's ability to compete in a digital environment? Interesting answers. Experimentation is at the very top of the list. Here's my opinion based on the answers that you see there. It sounds like these organizations think that a digital transformation first step should be much bigger than it ought to be. So where to start? I have 3 thoughts on where an organization should start. Number 1, bite size. Don't attempt to transform every aspect of your organization concurrently. That is a surefire way to fail. If you focus on too many things, it dissipates management leadership, and their focus is completely drawn away. I don't also think digital transformation is an experiment, as many thought leaders like to say. I believe it's something you have to get right. So if you start with bite size, it's easier. Many digital transformation leaders also say that it's truly about digitizing every aspect of your organization. Yeah, maybe eventually down the road, sure, it has to be. But at the beginning, not at all. Number 2, optimize. Target some quick wins that are easy and that provide value quickly. An article in Forbes earlier this year said that companies fail at digital transformation by focusing on optimization. I completely disagree with that. You don't have to be a unicorn, platform startup, or platformize your organization to be successful with digital transformation. The truth is, optimization is absolutely acceptable. If you look at Intel, their last major disruption was the i386 chip in 1985. They have been making next-generation processors ever since then and generating cumulatively hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue from that. Take Microsoft and the Xbox that they launched in 2001. It has also been refined and optimized, and it has made hundreds of billions of dollars for them. Use the crawl, walk, run approach when doing digital transformation, especially if these technologies are not familiar to you or in widespread use within your organization. You know, the hardest part about digital transformation is starting. And you know how to get over that hump. You start small with a bite size. Get into it. Have some success and wins early on. Work on the disruption later. Everybody talks about Uber. It is a very disruptive company. It has disrupted the taxi ride-sharing industry like you wouldn't believe. But the technologies Uber uses to run its own operation are the same technologies you have access to improve your company as well. And the last one is culturize. Transform as a team. Make it an organization-wide strategy. Employees love working for digital leaders. MIT Sloan's report again on digital business revealed that 80% of employees prefer to work for a digitally enabled company. And that's not limited to millennials in these numbers. 70% of all age groups interviewed say this. This is the era of the on-demand economy. Email is too slow. Text is okay if they reply right away. I mean, we've all sent a text to somebody and they don't reply in 24 hours. You think they're dead. If you order something at Amazon or at any other provider and they don't give you a shipping notification in a few hours, you think they're a hokey operation, because Amazon has set the stage and set the pace for that. Point number 3, the final quick point of my talk this morning, is don't fly solo. Transformational companies don't go it alone. They rely on the capabilities of experts where it makes good business sense. Just as you know what your company is really good at, you should also know what other companies are good at who can help you, and you can rely on them in your business. You must also very selectively choose the platforms that you use within your organization, because it usually requires a fair bit of change, development, and integration into your organization. It's not always affordable or easy to change once you've made those decisions. It could be integrating with providers like AWS or Google Cloud or Azure or any of these platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, software as a service. It generally requires a fair bit of effort. Consider these crazy stats here. 85% of organizations are using services from multiple cloud providers. 93% of organizations will use services from multiple cloud providers in the next 12 months. And 54% of C-level executives are pushing a cloud-first policy for their IT service capabilities. That is a lot of cloud providers. It makes sense. It really does. These services are readily available to help you, and they're delivered at a very cost-effective way that you can immediately implement them and hopefully increase revenues at a lower cost. But here's the problem. Look at these interesting stats from the same study. 15% of organizations work with 10 cloud providers. 58% work with at least 4 cloud providers already. So how are you going to manage all of these cloud providers? How do you mitigate multi-cloud risks, ensure security, performance, availability of all of your applications, and incorporate them all into your corporate umbrella? Well, if cloud strategy is part of your evolution, I know a little company that I would like to talk to you about. Total Uptime solves these very problems by giving the tools to you to radically improve availability, security, performance, and cloud integration. Consider this example where you might have had a few years ago corporate data center and maybe a backup data center with infrastructure there. This was a very, very common scenario many years ago. And now let's move a few things to Amazon Web Services, maybe a special application, who knows what. Maybe let's put some stuff at Azure as well. Backup side I have in this example here, but it could be maybe you're just incorporating Office 365. Now we'll add some authentication services to the mix. It might be one of these guys that you see here, or maybe using Azure Active Directory. Then we'll introduce some SaaS applications, but it could be infrastructure as a service, or platform as a service, or data as a service, or any of these guys, right? So as you begin moving and continue with your digital transformation, you may end up very much with 10 or more clouds. I think 10 years from now, it'll be way more than 10. 20 years from now, who knows? So with all these initiatives, you really start to run into this problem of sprawl. Everything is spread out all over the place. How do your users get to all these applications? And this is a typical scenario here where you have separate IP addresses for everything, separate host names for everything. It's very difficult to control. How do you maintain that control? So this is where a company like Total Uptime really can come into place. One cloud platform that can control access to everything at a network level. You can tie everything in together with VPN tunnels or direct connections, so they're all within your organization's network. Then you can enable, precise firewalling, load balancing, monitoring, and traffic distribution parameters, everything you want to see with every enterprise feature you could dream of. And now you're totally in control. And even if things go down, platform has the automatic capability to just quickly switch everything over to another location, whether you fail from a corporate site to Azure or whatever the case may be, without so much as a DNS change. So I'm pretty much done talking, except to say, here's my contact information at the bottom of the screen there. Feel free to send me an email with any hate. If you have any love, share it on social media, but send the hate directly to me, and I'll be happy to dialogue with you. I'm also saying that we are giving away the 70-inch 4K flat screen that we have in our booth. So if you want to enter to win, all you have to do is go to one of our Twitter or LinkedIn account there and share an article, and you will win. And we will choose that in the next week or so. That's it. Thank you very much.